and welcome to the third of the Mayor's Roundtables. This one focused on accelerators and incubators and startups. Just a quick show of hands, who's actually been in this beautiful and historic City Council chambers? Wow, well, this is, and some of you haven't, but so welcome. I think this is, the first of a discussion of this sorts coming into the City Council chambers, and this wouldn't have happened without our Mayor, William Peduto. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. For those of you who haven't had the opportunity to meet our Chief of Innovation and Performance, Deborah Lamb. Deborah came to us through an international consulting firm where she had been working in London, New York, and Hong Kong, and working through C40 cities, the 40 largest cities on Earth, and teaching the practices of sustainability, innovation, and technology. She wanted to come home. She's a North Hills gal, and we were able to bring her back. And her role here is to be able to take innovation, technology, sustainability, and performance and make it a part of everything we do in city government. But beyond that, her other job is to enable the things that you've been doing. And I've had the opportunity to work with almost everybody in this room at some point, and to make it so that we're throwing fire on the gasoline of what is being looked at as this city, and this city becoming a model of a 21st century city. But there's another challenge that's in there too. And it's about, as we look at workspace and accelerators and the opportunity to create entrepreneurship, how do we create those ladders of opportunity for everyone? How do we help those neighborhoods that haven't seen any glimpse of a 21st century economy, let alone any growth since the 1970s? How do we make it so that the person who works at Pep Boys, who wants to open up their own transmission shop, has the same opportunity as the software engineer from Carnegie Mellon to have a job, an opportunity, and the chance to build the American dream in this city? So as we look at this issue today, and we see it through the lenses of tech and see it through the opportunities that are there, think about this as well, because this is going to be the key component. A lot of these companies are going to want to locate within the city's borders, and they're going to want to open and operate in clusters. And what we have in abundance is land. How do we partner with you to be able to open up access to these buildings that have remained vacant for so long, to create those opportunities for everyone? That's what the focus partly of what we're going to be discussing today. But it also fits hand in glove with what we did with the Makers Roundtable, with the Clean Tech Roundtable, in building out that capacity for those companies into the spaces and the opportunity and the training to make it flourish. We have all the pieces right here in the city of Pittsburgh, probably more so than maybe any city on earth. We have all those pieces waiting to basically take off. And the question is, how do we, around this table and in this room, make it happen?
Thank you, Mayor. And in addition to the Mayor's leadership around this, one of, obviously, as many of you know, our strongest advocates around innovation and incubators has been Councilman Daniel Gilman.
Thank you, Chief. I went to Carnegie Mellon and graduated in 2004. And while I may have been an ethics, history, and public policy major, none of my friends were really in the humanities, and they were all there in CS and in ECE and in engineering fields and IT. And they came out of Carnegie Mellon, and sadly, almost each and every one of them took their company, their intellectual capital, their talent to Boston and Austin and Portland and DC and San Francisco. And I sat back, and at the time, at 21, you're sitting there wondering why, and why are all your friends leaving? And after 10 years with then Councilman Peduto on his staff and working with Carnegie Mellon and the University of Pittsburgh and Duquesne and the hospitals and so many of you in this room, you started to piece together this puzzle of the challenges along the way, from incubator and acceleration to venture capital to space to hiring to attorneys, all of the issues on the spectrum. And thankfully, we've seen a tremendous change in 10 years. This conversation would have been incredibly different 10 years ago. And looking around, a number of people in this room, wouldn't have even been in Pittsburgh and certainly not in this chamber. And that says great things to where the community has gone. But we still have a long way to go. We were talking before, I was talking with Lenore about, and I've been talking to a lot of you about that flex space idea. And where do you go when you come out of Alpha Lab or when you come out of one of these accelerators or incubators and you're not yet ready to sign a lease at $47 a square foot in downtown or in East Liberty and Shadyside, and you're at 6 employees, but you might be 32 in the next 15 months. Where do you go? How do you have that flexibility? How do you stay here? How do you look at your venture capital funder in the eyes and say, you know what, I want your money, but I want to stay in Pittsburgh because. And that's what we can do. And then lastly, just building off what the mayor said, because it's tremendously important, is this is economic development. Not only obviously job creation, but this is how you rebuild neighborhoods. When one of these companies comes into a neighborhood, the coffee shop's going in next door, and the bar and restaurant's going in across the street, and the dry cleaner's up, and this is how you build neighborhoods. And not only neighborhoods that sometimes haven't seen it in our communities, but pulling those neighborhoods together. President Suresh at Carnegie Mellon and at the time Chancellor Nordenberg, and I'm sure our new chancellor, have talked about the Forbes Avenue corridor. And you can call it Forbes, you can call it Fifth. The point is the same, that basically from Carnegie Mellon to the Point, it's the most unbelievable tech corridor opportunity you can have in the United States. And you have your pieces with the institutions, from the hospitals to 3 universities, really 5 universities. You have Rev Oakland there now. You have Startup Town. I mean, it's all right there. And as we bring more companies into downtown Pittsburgh, that Forbes Avenue corridor, to me, in 5 years and in 10 years, is going to be talked about in Cambridge and in Silicon Valley as one of the greatest models of how institutions and government and private developers partner to create a corridor. And you're not going to see vacant land or boarded up property between Carlo and Duquesne. It's not going to be there in 5 years. And that's the power of what this can do. So I look forward to hearing more discussions, and obviously much more after today, as we figure out where our gaps are and what role government can play in not only being a partner, but also a cheerleader, which might be the most important role we can play.
Thank you, Councilman. One of the challenges that Councilman Gilman alluded to is something that our Chief of Staff and Chief of Economic Development, Kevin Acklin, has been tirelessly working on and thinking about solutions for. So, Kevin.
Thank you, Chief, and appreciate everybody being here today. I am Kevin Acklin. I'm the Mayor's Chief of Staff, Chief Development Officer in the city, and we're also the hat in that capacity as Chairman of the Urban Redevelopment Authority. We are at a truly historic opportunity in our city's history. I like to say that prior mayors have been charged with managing decline. This mayor has the opportunity to manage growth, and we can't do this alone. But what we've tried to assemble from building upon the mayor's work here on council and working with folks like Councilman Gilman is to really professionalize city government, to hire people like Deborah and others who may not have worked in city government before, but they understand business. They come from the business world. So before I came here, I'm actually a 4th generation city worker. My grandfather was a fire chief in the city. My stepfather works for Public Works. My great-grandfather worked for Public Works. It's kind of typical Irish Catholic family. I was supposed to be the priest. I went to law school, and I worked with a lot of you. I worked with entrepreneurs. I started my career in Boston in the private equity world and came back to Pittsburgh working with technology companies. To the councilman's point, I lost a lot of clients. Clients who came out of Pitt and CMU with some of that initial capital, but they hit that valley of death where, that we all talk about, where there's a dearth of growth capital in this town, and they left town and went to other cities. Our charge is to retain that talent. We have institutions here. The mayor likes to call, they're the steel mills of today. They didn't go away. They just moved up the hill. Sorry to steal all your thunder. I spent a lot of time with you. So, they live in Oakland. Yeah, and live in Oakland where I'm born and raised. We want to be smart and make those investments. And so we truly, to Chief Lamb's credit in starting these collaborations, is to truly collaborate with all of you to understand where we're doing well within our authority. And with us today, we have Tom and Jennifer, who's back from maternity leave. Congratulations. Oh, wow, she's on leave from your family. Wow, that's dedication. To really understand how we can partner with you. The mayor has charged each of us with breaking down silos. And so in the old days where you had the URA doing something and the Housing Authority doing something, the chairpersons of those 2 authorities, myself and Chief McDonald Roberts, are just down the hall from each other. So if we have housing stock available in our business districts, which makes sense to house accelerators in the work that you're doing, those are conversations we can have and really put the weight of the city behind it. So really appreciate you all being here. Looking forward to not only the conversation today, but the takeaways that we can put into work to really realize the opportunity we have as a city. So thank you.
I just want to take the time to acknowledge two people that were inspirational in bringing us coming together here is Tara Matthews, who's our summer associate, and Jennifer Wilhelm, who is the innovation and strategist for the URA. So thank you for organizing this roundtable. This, like I said, is the third of the 4 roundtables, and similar to the other roundtables, we just want to have a rapid series of presentations to kind of set the scene. We have a diverse group of panelists here who are going to give us the lay of the land. And then what we want to do is open it up for a dialogue and discussion, as Chief Acklin said. What we're really concerned is knowing that a lot of good work has already been done, and how we as a city can further help and support Pittsburgh and taking it to the next level, supporting the mayor's vision, and making sure that it is inclusive and representative of all the strengths that the city has to offer to propel it to the international and national stage. So with that, Jennifer?
So I just want to quickly introduce all of our speakers. We have a few individuals here who are just going to give us a sampling of some of the types of things that are happening in the city. We wanted to give kind of a start off for our 2 topic areas, which is business services and acceleration, and also co-working. So our 5 speakers today: David Mawhinney, who is the co-founder and director of the Carnegie Mellon Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. We have Bill Jennerette, who is the director of Urban Innovation 21. We have Rebecca Harris, who is the director for the Center for Women's Entrepreneurship at Chatham University. We have Mark Mussolino, who is the director of Rev Oakland. And we also have Brandon Blash-Cohen, who is the executive director of Amistagi, which is a global service learning organization. And one of their projects is a co-working space that's new called the Global Switchboard. So without further ado, David.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, Dan, Kevin, for allowing us to join you today. I am co-founder and director, along with Lenore Blum, of the Carnegie Mellon Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And we really take seriously our role in regional economic development, and we're really happy to participate today because in 2007, Lenore founded Project Olympus, which was the first incubator here in town, and sort of set off the trend of creating things like Alpha Lab and Rev Oakland. So we're excited to be part of that. We do take our role in regional economic development seriously. Recent startups from Carnegie Mellon have created over 1,000 jobs here in the city. Some of them you may know. This is 4 moms. This was in the Wall Street Journal, Rob Daly and Henry Thorne. Henry has 2 degrees from Carnegie Mellon. Rob is an adjunct professor. They've been featured in national media the last 3 years. They were on Ellen DeGeneres' Mother's Day show. Duolingo here in Pittsburgh. It was the app of the year in 2013 in the App Store. Acquion Energy has based here in Lawrenceville. They've taken over the Sony plant, old VW plant down in New Stanton, and building their batteries there. Blue Belt Technologies recently got their US FDA approval. They had been selling in Europe, and now they're actively selling robotic surgical tools here. ModCloth, interesting story, started here. 2 Carnegie Mellon grads, Eric and Susan Kroger, started in the Strip District, got funding from San Francisco, took the headquarters out there, but they maintained operations and technical development here and employ hundreds of people in the region, right? Who's the next one, right? Well, one great candidate might be Soul Power. Soul Power started off as a Project Olympus probe. They went through Alpha Lab gear. They're here in the region. They won the Rise of the Rest competition this summer, and they got the Invention of the Year in 2014. Now, everybody knows this story, right? The Kauffman Foundation actually picked Pittsburgh and all of the members of the ecosystem here to say, hey, if you're not San Francisco and you're not New York City, what do you do? And so if you haven't seen this website from the Kauffman Foundation, you should go check it out, and you'll see the really cool things going on. Now, we're an international university, the 5th most international in the world, but among the top 50, the most international. So we attract the best and the brightest from around the world. So we want to reach out into the ecosystem of Carnegie Mellon and bring some of that back to bear here in Pittsburgh. For example, in January, Nest Labs sold to Google for $3.2 billion. Well, it turns out that one of the co-founders, Matt Rogers, has 2 degrees from Carnegie Mellon. Now, we got lucky. The week after the announcement of that sale, he came back to Carnegie Mellon to inspire our student and faculty, and we had nearly 500 people in the room as he told the Nest Labs story. This is a company called Anki, 3 PhD roboticists from Carnegie Mellon. They took their company out to California, but they've really stayed in touch with us. A year ago, they launched on stage with Tim Cook from Apple during his keynote speech at the developers conference. He's come back, Boris, one of the founders, he was the keynote speaker at our show and tell for Project Olympus this last spring, and continues to come back and work with our students and inspire them. Life sciences, we have a lot going on there. This is Jonathan Rothberg, who has created some of the most valuable genetics companies in the world. John Kaplan, who created the flip video cameras before the cell phone cameras got so good, sold it to Cisco, made a bunch of money. He gave us a nice gift, and along with the McCune Foundation, we've been able to create the Openfield Entrepreneurs Fund, and in the last 3 years, we've made 38 investments. 25 of them have stayed here in Pittsburgh. So how are we doing all this? We brought Project Olympus and the Don Jones Center together 2 years ago to form the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. We partner closely with the Center for Technology Transfer and Enterprise Creation, Reed McManigle's here today representing them, to create a sort of one-stop shop at Carnegie Mellon. We have 3 goals. One is to make CMU the premier entrepreneurial university in the world. The second is to create more valuable companies out of the great research and ideas that come from our students. And again, plug into that alumni network so that all of our alumni can be customers or suppliers or mentors or investors in each other's companies. We do that by embracing everybody at the university. Our board is all of the deans from all of the colleges. We have faculty liaisons in each of the schools, and we partner with the great research institutions like Lynn Brusco's here today from the Disruptive Health Technology Center. And what we do is they create the innovation through the research, and we help commercialize it into companies. The last slide I have here is a recent development, and Lenore Blum is the principal investigator at an NSF I-Corps site. This is a program that's gaining national notoriety. It actually was started by President Suresh when he was the director at NSF. And even in the title, you see that we are about diversity and regional economic development. So again, we take our role seriously, and we really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today about that.
Well, first off, I want to thank the mayor, Kevin, Councilman Gilman, Deborah Lamb for your vision and your work to make sure that the work that we're doing benefits all people in all communities. My name is Bill Jennerette. I am the CEO of an organization called Urban Innovation 21, and we run a program called the Pittsburgh Central Keystone Innovation Zone. We were started in 2007 with the goal of making sure that a lot of the good stuff that was happening in tech actually went out into the neighborhoods. And so very excited, 2007, when we were formed by Duquesne University, UPMC, and a variety of stakeholders. They're all here, the URA, with the goal of making sure that a lot of the great stuff that was happening in Oakland, Pitt, CMU, filtered into the Hill District and Uptown. And very early on, I had the pleasure of meeting up with Dale McNutt. And Dale, at the time, had an incredible space, and we said, why don't we figure out how we could utilize the incentives that we have through our KIZ program, along with your great space, to get some companies to locate here in Uptown, because as was stated earlier, from an economic development standpoint, when companies locate in a community, a lot of great stuff happens. You have a lot of other businesses, you have a lot of economic development that happens. And so that's sort of our joint story. So again, if clusters of high growth entrepreneurs move to and start or grow in an area, a lot of great things happen. And we're seeing that in Uptown in the Hill District. It's a process, but some really good stuff is happening. So the incentives we have, there's a direct cash incentive, a tax credit that goes to companies. So about $4 million in cash has gone to entrepreneurs that have been located in the Keystone Innovation Zone. We have a grant program where we provide seeds, small seed grants, on the tune of about $412,000. We also have a very robust internship program. This slide's a little dated, but we've provided 396 internships, paid internships for students from Duquesne, Point Park, Carlo, and CCAC to work for our innovation companies. And what I'm most excited about that is about 60% of the participants are women, and about 50% are African Americans, and that's something that you don't see. So when we talk about spreading this to communities, we have to be intentional, and so that's what our work is. Something else that we started doing in the last couple years was helping residents start businesses that could somehow feed into the ecosystem, because what we saw a lot of great stuff happening, but we really didn't feel like the residents could participate. So we've provided a bunch of incentives to help do that. So we work with hundreds of community-based entrepreneurs a year through our grant competitions, where we give out about $200,000 in grants and then provide wraparound services to a variety of community-based businesses, all with the goal of creating an inclusive ecosystem. So here, this is the Hill District and Uptown, and some great development has happened in that community since 2007. A lot of players have worked on helping to make that happen. The role that Start Uptown and some other of the real estate entities that house some of the companies are really the driving force in a lot of this development. That's it. Thank you.
So I'm Rebecca Harris. I'm the director of the Center for Women's Entrepreneurship at Chatham University. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for having us here, and for your team for inviting us. We really appreciate it. The mission of our center is to create economic opportunities for women through entrepreneurial training and through education, through mentoring, and through networking. We have our programs are broad and numerous, everything from a half-day workshop to the basics of starting a business, to a 10-week intensive development plan. Women are currently starting businesses at 1.5 times the national rate, the national average, and making them very key and significant players in this whole ecosystem, and positioned really to make significant contributions to what's happening in entrepreneurship. And our programs are customized to be women-centric and focus on increasing the ability of women to really do business, because here are the things that they really need. They need help securing funding, they need help hiring employees, they need to take calculated risks, and they need to ask. And those are some of the things that we really find are important when we're reaching out to our women. And our results, we've reached over 275 women business owners with customized programming. Our membership is 90 active members with exclusive opportunities to our membership community. Our outreach is extensive. We've worked and partnered with so many of you in this room. It's really been exciting, as well as attending and hosting many events. And in terms of future collaboration, here I see 2 strategic opportunities. One of the biggest challenges I see today is to collectively increase the level of digital literacy for women business owners. Time and again, over and over, we're seeing so much effort being placed into product and service development with very little expertise in digital literacy. And that can make or break a business, 100%. The second opportunity I see is for the city to get involved in certification programs and licensing. Those are very hard and arduous processes to go through, but if we can help them and really be on the ground helping women do that, that can lead to a huge increase in certification, which leads to both county, federal, local jobs, as well as licensing, which a lot of times people will say, too much paper, I'm done. Thank you very much. It's really an honor to be here today.
Thank you.
My name is Mark Mussolino. I founded Rev 2.5 years ago. It's a partnership with Oakland Real Estate, which is a family-owned real estate company in Oakland. They've been there for 90 years, strong ties to the community. I met them 5 years ago. We realized we had a shared vision for Oakland as a hub for technology companies. I think we're in auto there. So it started about 2.5 years ago. The impetus back then was I had just graduated from Alpha Lab, and along with 5 other companies, and we all needed a place to live, and I knew from my previous startup experience that the triple net commercial lease wasn't going to work. So we opened doors in one spot. We're fundamentally a co-working space, as hopefully that's clear already. So our vision then and still now is to see Pittsburgh transformed into a destination for aspiring entrepreneurs. We're not on that short list now, but should be and can be. Our specific mission is to help companies go faster. Sorry, here I'm on auto here. To help startups go faster, because all things being equal, speed still matters. So how Rev works, we're all about memberships. So we do monthly memberships, no long-term commitment. It's all inclusive. So for a flat fee, you get office space, everything you'd imagine that you'd need in a co-working space: conference rooms, phone booths, an event space. In addition to the physical infrastructure, we also do business services, so we bring accountants and financial planners and even a photographer in monthly. We vet them, we bring them to the companies. It's all about efficiency. We've had 100 events. We're also in Oakland, so we are in a KIZ zone. There are 2 KIZ zones in Pittsburgh, so Bill and his group are in one. We're in the one next to them. So all of our companies are eligible to be eligible, if that makes sense, because you have some other things you have to qualify for. And we have multiple locations, which I'll cover very quickly now. So this is actually just this is no wait space on the left and shoe fitters before we got them built. They're now up and running. Just wanted to give you an idea that flexibility in workspaces is one thing that we can definitely offer in terms of companies come in as one person and can grow into something much bigger than that. So we have conference rooms. We've got places where you can collaborate in office space. We have private offices. I showed it just because it's cool and you can put your own lights and make it your own place and call it home for a month or 6 months or 2 years or whatever you want. We have Rev branded K-Cups for our Keurig machine, and so it's all about building that community. These are our locations. We have 6 locations, soon to be 6 locations right in the heart of Oakland in the shadow of the University of Pittsburgh. We have 4 locations open right now. A 5th opens next month rather. We'll have 6 open by February. Sort of by the numbers here, we've got a current footprint of 15,000 square feet. We expect to be 30,000 square feet by the time we get everything online. I'm going to go back again. You can just see some numbers about how many inquiries we've fielded in our conversion rate. We right now have a membership of 28 companies. Across those 28 companies, we have probably 100 people that are coming to Oakland every day and working. There's a list of some of our companies on the right-hand side. A lot of connections to IW and Alpha Lab and Carnegie Mellon and a lot of the other representation that's in the room. I included Jibago down at the bottom. They happened to get bought by Facebook last year, so we like to think we played a tiny part in that. Like I said, we've also had many, many events and thousands of people walk through our doors. These were some guiding principles that I was going to cover. I probably don't have time to talk about that, so maybe I'll have the opportunity when we do the roundtable discussion. And just looking ahead, some opportunities for us specifically. At the end of this year, we'll be hosting a notable VC. They'd like to come in for 3 days and meet with 21 companies. So this meeting is serendipitous because we were about to reach out and say, hey, let's work together on this, because it's certainly not about Rev alone. We also have plans to establish a venture fund early next year, and then some other educational themed things beyond that, sort of part of our larger vision, sort of legs of the stool, if you will. And I just wanted to throw up challenges for us, and probably more broadly our transportation. I think thinking about being a world-class city, I think we have some transportation issues here in Pittsburgh and certainly Oakland that we can hopefully address. And more broadly, partnerships and profitability. Like any business, we need to stay alive tomorrow and beyond. So thank you for the opportunity, and look forward to the conversation.
My name is Brandon Blash-Cohen, and I'm the Executive Director of Amazaji Global Service Learning. Amazaji is a 20-year-old nonprofit organization. We've got a staff of 8 here in Pittsburgh and a budget of about $1.5 million. We organize reflective, rigorous, responsible global service learning programs in 12 countries. We're working in places like Tanzania, Ghana, Bolivia, Brazil, and here in Pittsburgh. We work with around 50 universities and 15 high schools each year, a couple of religious institutions, community groups, and basically we're connecting students to service learning programs all over the world. We're the only organization in this region with United Nations consultative status, and yet barely anyone in this room has ever heard of us. We're almost entirely invisible. Here's the problem. We're not alone. There are a lot of organizations just like Amazaji that are collaborating, connecting with groups all over the world, and for too long, we've all been invisible. So this leaves a lot of people thinking that perhaps Pittsburgh's not a global city. But in this room, I think we all know we are, in fact, a global city. So here's what Amazaji decided to do. And it was actually kind of an accident. In February of 2012, I had an extra desk in my office downtown. And I'm a really cheap guy, if you know me. And I decided, this desk's just getting dusty. Let's see what we can do to fill it. Well, one of the interested parties in filling that desk is a group called Awamaki. Awamaki is a Peruvian organization. We work in Bolivia. We thought, that's a nice marriage. Let's try it out. Well, within 1 week, we had an MOU with Awamaki. Within 1 month, we applied for a U.S. State Department grant together. And a few weeks after that, we started scratching our head thinking, what would this look like if we collaborated with more like-minded organizations? We actually shared a space together with several global organizations here in the city of Pittsburgh. By April of the next year, we had convened a large group of like-minded organizations, and by October of last year, we had our first committed group, Global Solutions Pittsburgh. At that time, Amazaji decided that we would just self-fund the creation of what we call the Global Switchboard. This is the Global Switchboard right here. It is in Doughboy Square in Lawrenceville, and we're very proud of it. And here's the difference between our co-working space and I think a lot of others around the country. We are a coalition-building co-working space with very specific programming meant to amplify our members' voices. We have a member-wide mission and vision, and we're constantly trying to meet our goals, and one of which is to bring more resources into the city of Pittsburgh for internationally collaborative projects. And here's what's happened just in the first 3 months since opening. We're still in our beta phase. We have 12 member organizations. Every one of our 25 desks is already booked and taken. There's no dust happening in that space. We've begun working with the foundation community and university communities. In fact, this is a facilitated drawing that the Sprout Fund did with us a few weeks ago that was very helpful for the future vision of what we're doing. That story with Awamaki has a happy, we won't call it an ending, but we'll call it a midpoint in that we just got the award letter from the U.S. State Department. We're going to transform lives of Pittsburgh youth, Bolivian youth, and Peruvian youth, not to mention inject a few $100,000 into our local economy through that grant. Finally, I'll just say that we're brand new. We're babies in this co-working game. We did it because it seemed like the right thing to do for us. Already in just a few months, we've started to import some of the best ideas that we learned from our communities around the world, and I think we're starting to export some of Pittsburgh's best community development ideas as well. We're honored to be here, and we very much look forward to this conversation. Thanks so much.
First, I want to thank all of our speakers. A lot of the programs they talked about are just a sampling of what's going on. We recognize that everyone in this room is doing something of the same caliber and reaching out in the community in the same way through your own mission and your own programs. We just wanted to give a small sampling to kind of get the conversation started about these two topic areas. If nobody has any specific questions for the speakers, I'll go ahead and we'll start our open discussion. And really how this is going to work is, just as I said, it's an open discussion. You all can talk. We're going to pass the microphone around. Please don't let the setup of this room discourage you from talking. It's really about hearing your opinions. And a few of the main topics we really want to cover that are mentioned in the agenda is around inclusion and diversity. How do we continue to accelerate some of the work that's happening in the space right now, and how do we get more people involved? Also, how do we get the city to help you and for you to help us? What do we do together to build this ecosystem? And we really want your ideas, so please let us know. This is just the beginning of the conversation. The real outcome of this is going to be that we continue to work towards actionable steps. So we really want to make sure that we're implementing ideas that come out of this. Anybody want to get us started off on our first question about inclusion and diversity? Any ideas on how we might continue to accelerate that, or new ideas on things we might try?
Hi, my name is Eve Picker. I have Bruno Works. What about asking city council members to talk to their constituents and actually talk about how these co-working spaces work for people in their neighborhoods? To date, I don't think I have had one person walk in the door of my co-working space brought to me through any city connections. So I think, you know, you could do a lot if you started there.
Hi, I'm Scott Wolovich with New Sun Rising. My question, I guess, around diversity and inclusion, or comment, is just to really expand that definition to include underserved entrepreneurs. I think we've gotten a little narrow focused in our definition of entrepreneurship, and just would challenge, you know, current and future actions of the region to make sure that we're looking at not just venture-based, tech-based entrepreneurship, but also the great example that the mayor used of the Pep Boy employee who wants to see his aspirations and to hold those at the same regards, and to provide the same resources to those people as we do in the venture tech space. I think there's a great opportunity to pull best practices and things that have worked within that space and apply them in different ways. And I think we could do some creative things in exploring some of those options.
Actually, Deborah, I have a kind of a follow-on to that, if I could, and I think I can do this in the traditional 90 seconds that startups gets to pitch. I could probably use the help of this piece of paper, which I'll pass out to the group up here and but I will promise to keep it to 90 seconds if you pass that around. The idea is actually a great follow-on to the comment made, because, in fact, I believe there's a substantially underserved part of the economy and the workforce, not just here, but in the United States. And they're in what I'll call knowledge-based services. And on the list there are some, I won't go through the whole list, but these, again, are sort of the heart of what people refer to as the knowledge economy these days, also referred to as technical professional services. And it's very interesting about these, if you look at those from the standpoint of both occupations and businesses, about 30% of all businesses in the United States are in this segment. Similarly, 25% of all occupations. If you look at the BLS data on what they call net birth, death, job creation in the U.S. in 2013, truly 83% of all jobs were created in these segments of the economy, these 6 or 8 segments. Interestingly, too, these are imminently exportable. You know, in an economy where our net balance of trade is a negative $500 billion, these industries are contributing about $100 billion positive trade balance. These are also very strong industries. If you look at the list, these are strong industries in Pittsburgh. You know, sort of the upshot of that last 2 points is that you can live and work in Pittsburgh and still export quite comfortably and efficiently throughout the world. And there's some information here about salaries. They're high-paying jobs, high growth. The other interesting thing is, even though they're services, somewhat more than physical hard products, there's a very great deal of opportunity for innovation and new products, but typically in the form of information technology. Think big data, think artificial intelligence, those kinds of things. And it also turns out that it doesn't take a lot of money to start a lot of these businesses. They're not high asset-oriented businesses. But in my research, I haven't found any entrepreneurship programs in the U.S. that focus on this segment in terms of creating businesses. I found maybe a handful of economic development programs in the world focusing on this. And there's even not a great deal of research going on about how you start and run businesses in this segment. So what do we need? Well, I think it's very simple. I think we just have to recognize the opportunity here and focus accelerators, investment funding, economic development programs on this segment of the economy, and recognize that, as the gentleman back here said, these are not sort of the typical technology, hard product, hardware-based businesses, but they're very high-paying, high-value add, and there's a great opportunity here. So, you know, it's about strategy. As we all know, strategy is picking the battles you can win, and here's a great win opportunity for Pittsburgh, in my opinion. So that's my message. I'd say it's a little bit of strategic thinking, and I think, again, it's straightforward. I think the other piece would be developing some programs that provide education around how to start and run businesses in these sectors. There are some differences in how you've done that. I've started probably a half a dozen or so businesses in the sector, and again, I think there's even a need for a little more research about how you do that effectively. So thanks. I appreciate the opportunity.
Hi, my name is Juan Garrett. I'm the Deputy Director at Riverside Center for Innovation, and we're talking about diversification and inclusion. There's just a couple of things I do just want to add, is that we have just started, and probably will be announcing very shortly, I keep saying this, but the Southwestern Pennsylvania Veterans Chamber of Commerce. That's a group that has not been targeted within our region. And one of the reasons we started that, because we do entrepreneurial training programs in our facility, and now we have begun to do entrepreneurial training programs in neighborhoods. And we target women, minorities, and all disadvantaged businesses. And that's where we were able to pick up a network of 115 veteran-owned businesses, which we started. And so we decided to take it to another level and create that Veterans Chamber of Commerce. One of the things that we are finding out is through certification is veterans are not certified, but we did find agencies such as GACO and the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission that do provide hand-holding certification for veterans. So I did want to talk about that. And then the other piece that I wanted to mention about is we're talking about creating all these funds and venture capital funds. However, the folks that we target, along with probably some of the groups that Bill targets, a lot of these companies have very difficult in receiving financing, and that's because when minorities and women, they come out of the gate wrong. They come out with bad credit. Most of these funds, that VC funds and all these alternative funding sources, still focuses a lot on credit history, credit score, and all the things. A lot of the companies have turned themselves around, but their credit score is holding them back from receiving fundings. So if we're going to create a fund, let's create a fund that really addresses some of the issues that help some of these diverse companies get to the next level.
Chief Lamb, if I can for just one quick second, and I apologize for jumping in, but the last three speakers led up to something I've been working on and that I was going to use as a closing remark on this, and that is we also have to change who we're targeting originally. If we're looking for people who are coming out with a business at 22, 23, 32, 33, it's too late. This conversation more broadly needs to include Pittsburgh Public Schools, Community College of Allegheny County, and start looking people at 15, 16, and 17 to understand what entrepreneurship means, what opportunities are out there, and start working towards that your junior year in high school, your sophomore year in high school, feed into a trade school, feed into a community college program, and get out there and especially to some of the careers that Professor Mason was talking about, it doesn't necessarily take a 4-year degree. It certainly doesn't take a master's and a PhD, and we need to take this about 10 years behind where often many of our organizations and rooms we're talking to exist.
Mary McKinney from Duquesne University Small Business Development Center. I think Juan turned the conversation back in his last comment to probably the groups that were originally in mind when you said inclusiveness and diversity. I think oftentimes I'll go to a meeting and the people in the room look like most of us here do in the room. And I think as a new mayor and a new administration, you could do some outreach to our growing immigrant community and our African American community and make sure they are represented in various meetings. And like when we began the incubator or the PCKIZ up in the Hill, I mean, we were the only KIZ program at the time, and it's still focused on the Hill in a depressed neighborhood, which would be basically a very inclusive KIZ in the end. And I think that we've got several minority-owned businesses now up in the Hill. They're doing well. And I really do think it should be on all of our radar screens, particularly as we pick committees for various things when we're looking for vendors. Make sure that all of the government guidelines are being followed in terms of giving X% of businesses, of the business of the city to minority businesses and immigrants. Just to have it on our radar screen more, because as I said, as I go to meetings in this town, typically they're not very diverse within the meeting.
I'll jump on that real quick. That is a more than a cognizant goal of this administration. It is the goal. 40 years ago, diversity meant make sure you have the I-League represented. Ireland, Italy, and Israel. This city has changed, and it's continuing to change. And the diversity of that should be a part of every board, authority, commission, and even gathering that we put together. You know what we'll end up with? A much better product.
Hi folks, thanks for having me and the opportunity to speak. I'm Josh from the hardware store. We think that if the community is going to move forward There needs to be more talk amongst community members. So the first thing we would propose is that the incubators and the co-working space set up a quarterly meeting so we could all get together and make sure that we're all on the same page. And the second thing we would propose is some sort of universal pass system for people who would like to use the co-working spaces. What that would mean would be basically you would have a home membership and then have access to the resources, talent, and knowledge in the other co-working spaces on a limited basis. So if you're really talking about engaging that entrepreneur who isn't necessarily looking to make that $100 million tech company, you need to have flow of information and you need to have access to networks almost as much as you need to have that startup capital and that fall off the cliff capital that a lot of us are lacking. So that's kind of where I would leave it. Thanks, guys.
So I think, in my opinion, my name is Denise, I'm with C-Level. The way to change the communities is to start thinking about the customer. To change communities, I think we have a great group of accelerator spaces and co-working spaces. But I think we're going to have to start focusing as a group on how do we get these entrepreneurs a customer? How do we get them in these diverse communities and not just get them customers in those communities, but drive attention to those businesses? So I think, in my opinion, and you guys are all a lot smarter than I am, what we should focus on is what's next. Because I believe the accelerators do a great job in preparing the companies. We just have to help them get business.
One other thing that we researched a little bit ago, my name is Paul Burke. I'm formerly of ThinkTiv, now I have a company called Demand, and we just jumped into a building in 6901 Lynn Way in the heart of North Point Breeze, just next to Homewood. Cool, interesting, exploratory space. Come on by. Anyway, one of the things that we talked to a lot of co-working spaces around is that we all have a desk model built around like square footage per desk or butts and seats, very small square footage to try to make the economics work of the individual facilities. What that causes is the need to really put a whole bunch of desks in small spaces, which then inversely impacts the ability to collaborate and connect and get together physically. I think something that would be really valuable would be getting the city to invest in creating work centers or opportunity centers where people could meet up, that we'd be able to actually rent, borrow, or use space that everyone could get to that was oriented more around collaboration and meetups, big tables, big desks, big chairs like this. When we have those, we beg, borrow, and steal from each other, right? We use Alpha Lab gear for Startup Weekend. We use anything that we can find to have meetings that can hold 20, 30 people. It'd be amazing if there were centers placed around that didn't sort of impact someone's economics for a per desk model that allowed for us to get to these collaborations. So.
Well, let's move on to our next discussion question around how do we become internationally competitive, and how does Pittsburgh become a place where everyone wants to come here to start their company, where everyone wants to look at our companies for possible products and services? I know Denise, you kind of touched on this in terms of that's the next big step. How do we then, once we get these companies going, how do we make them successful, and how do we make everyone look at Pittsburgh? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Go ahead, Laura.
So one big thing is transportation, not just in Pittsburgh, but getting to Pittsburgh. So what I see is many companies, they'll start, ones we know at Carnegie Mellon, go on to Alpha Lab, Alpha Gear, go into co-working spaces. But the next level of funding, which is really critical, it's hard for us to attract if people with money coming from West Coast can't get here in a day, can't get here. So, without having daily service to the West Coast, they're going to harvest our companies and take them away, and we see that over and over again. Again, so I was thinking perhaps, we can work with East Coast, bringing funds in, Washington, D.C., New York. You can come in the morning and leave at night, but sometimes it's $1,000 a pop. I just came from D.C. yesterday. Not easy. So I think that is a huge, huge impediment for our attracting the kind of funds that will keep companies in town and for people viewing Pittsburgh as an international center. I think that's one thing. Another thing that I have been really concerned about, again, coming from the university, is we attract students from all over the world. They're coming to Pittsburgh, and they're loving Pittsburgh. They want to stay in Pittsburgh. And many of these students who are non-U.S. nationals, non-U.S. residents, they're very entrepreneurial. When they graduate, they would start their companies here in the region if they had half a chance. And because of our immigration situation, we're not allowing these people to stay here and start companies. We have to work. So these are students who are coming from all over. We're educating them. We're even pouring in our IP, and then we're telling them to leave. That's a big issue, and it's a huge diversity thing, because we're getting people from all over who will actually help with the diversity. They will bring their families. They will tell people in their countries about Pittsburgh. So I think not the immigration, but retaining our non-U.S. students here in town is a really big area.
No, not to put you on the spot, but
Yeah.
you build off on that. You're talking about the immigration law at the federal level.
Yes, so, getting what's called an
Specifically
H-1B
about that, so
visa
I'm telling
to stay here and work, and so either we're forcing somebody to get a job in one of the large companies that can get these visas, or basically we're saying you can't stay in town. So we have ideas on what to do. The governor of Massachusetts has a plan for retaining students in Massachusetts. There's ideas of using some of those ideas here. So that's where we could use work with the mayor's office, both in transportation and the immigration situation.
One thing we have to do is be authentic. We have to, not try to be Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley has done some things very well. They've done some things not so well. We need to be Pittsburgh. We need to be authentic about who we are. We need to celebrate our successes. We have, incredible universities here. We have the number 6 accelerator in the country. With Alpha Labs. And we need to celebrate that. It's funny. Every time I turn on the television, I see a commercial about New York City, and why you should start your business in New York. And they've totally sort of changed the game as it relates to how you perceive New York. When I think about New York, I think about a really expensive place, but they've changed that. We have to do that here because there are a lot of advantages to being here. But we also have to be authentic, and we shouldn't apologize for who we are and what we are.
Can I just add on to that? I think the other really important piece of this, Mr. Mayor, is maintaining the livelihood of the neighborhoods. The neighborhoods are what really make us alive, and it's the value of each one of those, and the personality, and the businesses in those neighborhoods. If you don't have the coffee shop and the dry cleaners and the pet store, you're like, where do you go? So I love all these technology companies. We need them. We need their growth. We need the money that they bring. But if we don't have the ground businesses and have them supported, I think we become a vacant city in many ways.
Yeah. Can I make a comment? So I certainly don't have a specific answer, but I wanted to offer maybe a foundational concept, something that I think about, a lens through which I see the world, which is abundance versus scarcity, and so specifically the mindset of abundance versus the mindset of scarcity. And so, for example, people who have a mindset of scarcity tend to compete instead of collaborate, and they tend to be takers, and they tend to think that everything is a zero-sum game, and versus people who are think of the abundant mindset, they're basically the opposite. They're going to collaborate, they think all boats rise, and they tend to be givers instead of takers. And so I think one of our challenges as a city, if we want to be a world-class city, is to make that shift to a mindset of abundance, because I would sort of argue that there are a lot of people here who don't think that way, and we're competing about things, or competing for things that we don't need to compete. I think that's where a lot of our silos come from.
Pittsburgh Tech Council, and I just have just a few things to say. I think that I've been here long enough to warrant myself as a Pittsburgher, and I think that's been about 13 years, so hopefully all of you revere the work that I have personally done and professionally done across this community. But I just want to say something very clear that I have found just having worked around the world and see it through a different lens, as Mark has made a comment about abundance. It is not about Pittsburgh, it is about the solutions that Pittsburgh has to change the world. And if we had that view, I think that many of us would begin to have very different conversations. And that was a view that was had here 100 years ago. What was happening here were the solutions that drove changes all around the world. And I think if we have that model and we start to think about abundance and not internal competition, and we realize that it's not just about Pittsburgh and about these amazing neighborhoods and about the work that all of you are doing, but it's about the solutions that are being created here that change the world, not just changing Pittsburgh. Thanks.
Wow, there's kind of a theme here. Babs Carrier from the University of Pittsburgh Innovation Institute. So I think one of the things that we do incredibly well in Pittsburgh is we create these startups. We all know that. They're tech, they're non-tech, whatever. We do a really good job of that. We do a fantastic job of supporting at the early stage these companies, I think. I think the big thing, and I think I'm echoing what Mark said, what Audrey said, what Paul said, what a number of people said. I think that we have to get to the next level. We need the customers. If we can test the ideas that are created in our great classrooms and in all the incubators. I mean, our city does a fantastic job. All of you guys and everybody here from the economic development and the T-bed community, we support startups, but I think it is a good idea if we can all work together much more to get to the next level, which is in terms of testing the theories that the ideas are founded on, and then getting them to the sort of place where they actually have customers, whether that's Pittsburgh or elsewhere. I think we have enough of those resources to be able to do that, but I think it's been a bit of maybe too competitive, maybe just some closed shops in terms of how to do that, because I think that's the thing that stops us. You know, if companies, no matter what they are, have customers, revenues, profitability, guess what? You get talent, you get funding, you get mentorship. All of those things come as a result of that kind of success. And I think we have the foundation to do it, but I think that we haven't figured out how to put those pieces of the puzzle together. Thank you very much.
And I think the city could help us with the large companies. They don't buy products and services from the startups. So if you're looking for an area to help us with that, that would be one.
Good afternoon. My name is Petra Mitchell. I'm with Callis Connection. I think many of you know we work with the existing established manufacturers in our community. But one of the things we're thinking about is how do we continue to link this very important sector with our startup and our development community. So if we invent it here and develop here, can we also make it here? And I think, David, to your point, you know, those of us working with those companies, we need to encourage them to use the local services, use local service providers, and to be open to working with this entrepreneurship community so that we can all work together.
Hi, I'm Jim Jen, and I'm responsible for the Alpha Lab program for Innovation Works. And just to add on to a couple of things that have been discussed, I think what Bill was talking about was celebrating our successes. I think that's a really important point to emphasize. I know that when I'm talking with out-of-town investors, trying to convince them to come to Pittsburgh, to come meet with our companies, attend a demo day, you know, we really have to highlight sort of critical mass. So kind of show them, well, one, it's talking about the successes. So pointing to other companies that they may have heard of here in Pittsburgh, the Four Moms, the Resumators, No Waits, companies that they've heard of sort of independently, and they'll say, oh, I didn't realize that was a Pittsburgh company. So that's an important part of making them realize there's that this is a region that has a lot of momentum going for it. And that's the other thing. When startups, and I admit my bias is going to be more focused on tech because that's what I know. But when we coach our startups to raise money, you know, it's all around traction and momentum. Show them that you're doing great things on a smaller scale and that you've got the potential to burst to the next level. And I think that's really where Pittsburgh is at. And so those are a couple of things that we have to do is we have to continue to work here and have these critical discussions on how we can get better. But at the same time, we have to externally promote all the great things going on here and then show that there's sort of scale here. So we've got a set of organizations, whether it's accelerators, co-working spaces, funding organizations, universities, that has enough talent here for the companies to grow and for the investment to come here. I think also when I'm talking to talent, folks trying to convince them to come to Pittsburgh to join companies or do their startup in Alpha Lab, a lot of it is making them aware that there is density, so that if the startup doesn't make it, is there 3 other startups they could join? Is there enough going on here so that it's not really that risky a move? So those are a couple of the themes I wanted to sort of introduce to this discussion.
I'd be curious to hear yours and others' impressions. And I hear this a lot, the sort of idea of a longer bench. And I wonder if, and I'd be curious folks' comments in this room, is that
perception? I mean, when I kind of got into thinking about this 5 years ago, I think it was reality, that there was pretty short bench here in Pittsburgh in a lot of ways. I think that's probably changed. So I'm wondering, just from your, from the collective, wisdom in this room, is that something that's a perception that needs to be broken down more? Do you still think Pittsburgh is, I would think in certain marketplaces we're going to have a shorter sort of bench than maybe a Silicon Valley as an example. But what's your perception on that as a city? Is it something that's we're starting to break through, or?
I think I'll speak first. In terms of perception of the technical and development talent here, I don't think there's any question about that. I think that in certain sectors, technology sectors, Pittsburgh's also perceived as having a strong and deep bench. Maybe some other sectors, because we haven't had as many companies that have hit home runs in that sector, there may be the perception that that sector we may not have as much.
Maybe I'll add to what was said so far. Yeah. So I'll agree with Jim that I think in terms of technical skill, we can certainly knock it out of the park here. Again, just my lens on the world, I think one of the things I've seen people struggle with is the idea of creating a learning organization as opposed to thinking about the individual people. It's like, how do we actually embed specific skills and ways of thinking in the teams if we're talking about startups and are trying to grow very, very quickly, how do we do that? Right. I mean, we have we have the educational institutions, but the way that they teach people is not siloed, but it's a different type of education than what, say, a group of 3 or 4 people need. As they grow to 20 people, have they learned all the things that they need to do that well? I mean, people are trying. I just don't know that we've actually reached, if critical mass is the right language. So I'll just say learning organizations, maybe that's related to this topic. That's still a challenge for our community.
I think it's both reality and perception. And I think Bill mentioned New York, having a lot of publicity. We haven't done that. We're very humble. We're very Midwest. Many things are happening here. We don't project that. We don't advertise that. And I remember when I first came here from California, everybody said, culture shock? Well, I came here. I wanted to be here. And there is so we are not really promoting ourselves in ways we really can. And I think that's a big thing, and I think that's where the mayor's office can really help a lot. And maybe it is an advertising campaign, maybe it's being out there much more in the world.
I think sometimes it's promoting what you want to be. So New York is promoting themselves as a startup capital. Is New York really a startup no. But you're promoting what you want to be. I mean, one of the things that we can really promote, because we're actually ahead of the game, is a place where we're really inclusive. And when you look at the number of women entrepreneurs, you just look at Soul Power, that just one rise of the rest. There wasn't another woman entrepreneur in any other cities that won. When you look at some of the stuff that we're doing in terms of inclusion, we need to promote that, and promote it even if we're not quite there yet. But
It's important to note, too, that New York City went from almost not on the list
That's
10
it.
years ago to the number 2 mecca of startups in this country. So.
We have a couple people who are waiting to speak.
Hi, thank you. I work at Incubators and I manage the social enterprise initiatives there. And I have less of a recommendation than a question for everybody here in this room. One area we focus on at Idea Foundry is social enterprise, which means for-profit companies that have inherent social or environmental benefits attached to their business models. So one thing that social enterprise can do is bring along a lot of the other assets that many of the panelists have touched on, such as women-owned businesses, economic development for neighborhoods, and also international development. So developing solutions that benefit others in other countries around the globe, solving those global problems. So I really, this is a growing trend. It happens around the world. Pittsburgh is growing in this field as well, and I think we're ripe for this type of entrepreneurship. Young people coming out of college are interested in being entrepreneurs, but also solving big social problems. So I'm just wondering, again, more of a question. I'd love to hear more from those in this room, how we as a region, the city included, can encourage the growth and development of these types of companies, but also, the organizations all around us that support them. Thanks.
I think that's the 4th question.
Yeah, in a way it is. Yeah. So did anybody have a comment on that specifically? We can.
Well, I think that's probably the key to keeping millennials here. I mean, that's really what we're getting at. It's that energy, it's a social enterprise, it's not wanting just for themselves, it's for the bigger system. So I think we have to really look at that group and figure out how we're going to continue to keep them. I don't have all the answers, but it is really targeting that critical group.
Let me jump in and use that as a segue because I'm 20 minutes late for a meeting that I better go to, not get in trouble with a council member. First off, thanks everybody that's here. You know, this is the third in a series that Deborah put together, and it's been a partnership with the White House. So when we did our first, and it wasn't by coincidence that our first was on Makers Movement and the president's visit to East Liberty to promote Tech Shop in the Makers Movement, then the following day at the White House inviting people from all around the country. When I went, and I was one of the people that was invited, and sitting in the front row was Carnegie Mellon. And in the second row was the Children's Museum. And there were more representatives from the city of Pittsburgh there than there were from Boston. And that's a good statement, because Silicon Valley can talk about the innovation side of making things, but they have no history in actually producing it. The second part, the clean technology. And it coincided with the EPA's visit. And the White House sent business forward to be at that roundtable last week. And again, it wasn't a coincidence. The White House has noticed what Pittsburgh is becoming. Not what it was, but what it is becoming, and you know what? We're already there. The clean tech industry in this town, there were people in that room who are doing incredible things who didn't know that the other companies were even in this city. And it's that type of collaboration about bringing them together. What can city government do? Bring you together, that helps to build it. This is the third part. We're looking at the accelerators and the spaces, the organizations that are pushing those organizations and those companies and those individuals to realize their dreams, the spaces that are being created in order to do it. And that will be followed by the fourth, which will be the entrepreneurs and the investors, the ones that are going behind it in order to make sure that the accelerators have the funding to do it and that the spaces are being funded by people in order to be able to make it happen. All four of those work together in one big box. And that's really where the next phase comes. The stuff that you're talking about today is going to be utilized over the course of the next couple of years. I've given Kevin Acklin the charge as the chairman of the URA to completely revamp the Urban Redevelopment Authority. From top to bottom, look at it and look at the mission, because we haven't done that since the days of David Lawrence. And understand there's two critical needs in the city right now. Number one, all the things that you're talking about, and this again is what can the city do? To throw gasoline on top of that fire, to make it so that all of the things that are happening, there is a partnership and a capacity built within the Urban Redevelopment Authority and the City of Pittsburgh to make it a reality, to push it. And at the second part, look at all those other areas that have been left behind and create ladders of opportunity so that, as we were talking about before, every neighborhood has the ability to be a part of it. And that really becomes the focus of a newborn URA. There's something wrong when, you know, there's a push that comes to spend $30 million of limited government money for a new scoreboard and seats in a stadium, when that same $30 million could be used to see $3 billion in new development occur. Something wrong when a focus becomes on retail developments and incentives being given to produce them, that produce jobs, that put people in positions where they need public assistance for food, for transportation, for housing, instead of using those same funds to help to spur development and good paying jobs that can actually make people and help them to benefit themselves. There's something wrong when housing dollars go strictly to build warehouses of poverty that are torn down in 30 years, instead of giving that same voucher the power to have equity to be able to buy a house in a neighborhood, renovate it, and be able to restore a neighborhood. So we're going to reprioritize the way city government operates, and it's going to empower the people that are in this room to have a greater say and more of an ability to carry out your mission. So that's what city government can do. I got to run. Darlene Harris is going to be mad at me.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I
always find it difficult to follow or go before the mayor just because he speaks so well and articulates the issues so well. But let me just briefly summarize and close about some of the next steps in terms of what I've heard and what we're going to do going forward. What I've heard is that obviously at the end of the day, hard infrastructure or infrastructure is still an issue, whether it's the transport or build-in space or different areas of opportunity. We need to work better on that, and that's something that we're definitely going to look for. What I've heard is that we also need to do better in terms of networking and collaborative opportunities. And that's something that we are already planning to do. As Jennifer noted, this is going to be a first of many dialogues. We specifically positioned this to be a roundtable of sorts that allows me to have my listening tour and kind of hear from all the best experts and professionals in the region on this. But I think going forward, there is going to be an ongoing series of dialogues where, I will be reaching out and engaging with everyone here and in the broader innovation community in Pittsburgh to kind of look and capture some of those opportunities. And what I've also heard is that we need to brand ourselves in a better light. I completely agree that having worked, as the mayor noted, in many parts of the world, in many cities, I don't think Pittsburgh is any less than any of the top cities. We are on par with New York and San Francisco and Paris and London. We just haven't positioned or branded ourselves in a similar fashion. And to that end, our team has started to explore some of those opportunities in terms of trying to leverage and galvanize that kind of marketing communications and that kind of identity at the national and international level, and very much along the mayor's vision. So immediately in terms of next steps, though, like I said, this is the third roundtable. The next roundtable is next Wednesday with the startup and entrepreneur community. And then after that, we will be following up for ongoing dialogue to essentially create an innovation roadmap. Concrete actionable plans that we collectively as a community can measure, track, and implement to really take Pittsburgh to the next level and drive it forward. And we as a city could not do this by ourselves, and we very much look forward to working with each of you in partnership and in collaboration to do this, because we know it's not going to be easy, but we appreciate all the good work that you've already been doing to take Pittsburgh to this level. So let us as the city help us collectively take it to the next level. Before I close, I want to just acknowledge a couple more things. I want to thank the city cable team for filming this. You'll be able to see this on our city cable channel and also on our YouTube channel. Also thank, again, Jennifer and Tara and also Claire and Jeff all around who have been really helpful in supporting and pulling these roundtables together. You've also will be able to see our tweets coming out, Accelerate Pittsburgh hashtag, and also PGHIP to follow us around. So thank you so much.